You go.
It didn't.
It didn't. There you go.
We're
Welcome
on.
to Heroic Hotline. We are very blessed to have Brett Powell join us today. And Brett, he's works at the Archdiocese of Vancouver and is in a leadership role there. And we're going to talk about leadership today. So, welcome, Brett.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
So, what is leadership?
Oh, that's a big question.
And why did you choose that as the topic for your podcast that is now available on heroicmen.org?
Oh, wow. That's great. So what is leadership? I mean, there is thousands of definitions that are out there that try to encapsulate the nature of what leadership is. I like the simple ones. John Quincy Adams, I'll probably butcher this one, but he said, if your actions inspire others to be more, do more, become more, then you are a leader. And when I think about more modern day, people especially in the Christian leadership space, think about leadership. They think of John Maxwell, kind of a leadership guru, former pastor. And he just simply said, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And then he goes on to say, if you think you're a leader and no one's following you, then you're only going for a walk, which is a good line.
It is a
Um,
very, very good line.
yeah. And I mean, we can really complicate things, but if you present yourself in the world and engage with others in such a way that you really inspire them to become more of who God created them to be, and if you're able to influence others and get them involved in things that are aiming up and bringing transformation and goodness into the world, then yeah, you're a leader. And we can complicate it. And I mean, one of the things I would want to say right away is that there's counterfeits of leadership, or there are maybe just deficient ways of understanding what leadership is. And one of them is to think that you're a leader when you have a title or you have a position of power or of authority. And of course, as Christian leaders, we understand that that's not what leadership is about. Jesus spoke very clearly about this. He said, the rulers of this world lord it over their people. This will not be for you. And when Jesus himself wanted to demonstrate that he was a man of quote unquote power, what did he do? Well, he got a bucket of water and a towel and he began to wash people's feet. And he got up on a cross and he made an incredible self gift of himself for others. That's really the nature of leadership. It's not about position and power. If anything, it's about power, influence with people, not power over people. And there's a very, very important distinction that you
Yeah.
make there. So
Well, and we see the successes and the failures of that in everyday life. And we've
yeah,
all worked for bosses that are on either side of that equation. I was just out visiting one of my former classmates who was inspector with the Calgary Police Service, and he talked about the importance of him going and talking to his guys and getting to know them, much like Jesus talked about. He walked with his disciples, right? Like
yeah,
they didn't just happen.
yeah.
He showed them and he walked with them.
Yeah, absolutely. When people, especially in organizational leadership, whether it's in military or police service or in the corporate world or academia or whatever, it doesn't matter. But when people really approach it kind of from this position or title point of view, they never have that incredible sweet privilege of one of their staff coming into their office, closing the door, looking them in the eye and say, "Hey, can I talk to you about something personal?" They might have their back for 40 hours a week or their brain for the same amount of time, but they don't have their heart. And when, like you say, you're the boss who is, getting to know his men, that's just so important. It's so critical. And you can't fake it. People know whether you really care or this is just some facade, something you're putting on like a poser because you think it's the right thing to do. Because ultimately, your words have to give way to your actions, and how you act and behave in such a way to demonstrate that you care for people. I mean, that's real leadership. I mean, you asked the second question you asked is why did you start the podcast, Leadership Where It Matters Most, kind of focusing on leadership. You want me to maybe just speak to that for a minute?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So this is, yeah, it's a new endeavor. A good friend of mine, Jake Kim, and I had a podcast, Way of the Heart, for 4 or 5 years. And we've kind of put a pause on that, which gave me a little bit of bandwidth to get into something new. And I've always had this tagline, Leadership Where It Matters Most, to give direction, purpose, guidance for a lot of the things that I do, not only in my work, but in some of the side things that I'm doing. And leadership where it matters most, I'm speaking specifically about leadership in the family and leadership in the church. And the reason why leadership matters most in those domains is because the family is, and always will be, the most important institution in the world. I believe that married love and family dynamics, family life, can literally change the world. Everything good in the hearts of people can be planted as seeds in the four walls of a home. Good meaning ambition, holiness, desire to serve, all those things. And then when you look at the church, well, the church has the most important mission in the world, and it always will be, because ours is the only mission that has eternal consequence. Like, I don't care what Fortune 100 company you work for, that mission is deficient and secondary. It's not to say that that work isn't important, and if people are called to it, that's great. But the church does have the most important mission in the world. And so we have a moral obligation to engage with effective leadership to carry out our mission, because our mission is the most important mission in the world. So that's really the essence of why I start this podcast, is to have conversations with people that are leading in both of those domains. And then so it's for parents, it's for people that are leading in the church, but also those who maybe don't have a position of leadership in the church, but want to support and be involved and engaged in their local church communities and things like that. So that's really the essence of it. And it's been quite a fun ride. And I look forward to season 2, which will be releasing sort of early September.
Oh, that's awesome. And
Yeah.
we do have some men listening right now. We got Loran saying, good morning, Brett, and
Hey there, Ryan.
Corey and Ty. Just thanks for being here, brothers. And that's where it's interesting. And I'm kicking myself now because I was going to bring down my missile. So today's the feast of Saint Joaquin and Saint Anne,
Yep.
and if you read the first reading out of Sirach, it's exactly what you're talking about, where you have people that will, even though you're dead and gone, you've got people talking about the wisdom that you provided.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking of my dad, who passed away a couple of years ago, and how we talk about some of the things he said and did, and as you know, I've got a fairly large family. You and I have the same amount of children, so uh, uh, there needs to be some organizational leadership in that chaos,
Absolutely. Yep.
and but just that wisdom that is needed. So you don't have to have a title to be a leader.
Absolutely. It really comes down to influence. And, it's funny because when people are asked, even in corporate environments, where people ask, like, who are some examples of the best leaders you've ever encountered and had in your life? And if they're really thinking about it honestly, the people that are most often identified are people like, actually, my grandpa, who from a very young age believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Or they had a high school teacher that accompanied them through a very difficult time. It's not usually somebody that's like big in strategy and their decision making and some corporate leader. It's somebody who accompanied them in a way that was deeply meaningful, that even just in that relationship inspired them to become all that God had designed them to be. That's who we speak to. And so by nature, when you think about this day, and I think it's Grandparents' Day, right? Is it Grandparents' Day? I think it is. So
I
happy
think so.
Grandparents'
Yeah.
Day. Yeah. Yeah, that's it's an incredible position to be able to influence the next generation. Absolutely. There's another line, and I'm sure you have seen this to be true, but There's a lot of things that people will forget about your life. They'll forget a lot of your success and failure. They'll forget a lot of the decisions you made. They'll certainly forget the address and the home and the cars you drove and all those things. But what people tend not to forget is how they feel in your presence. What your presence in their life did in their heart, in their mind, and for them for the good. They will not quickly forget those things. So, yeah, I mean, the reading
Yeah.
from Sirach kind of confirms that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I wrote an article, and this was years and years ago. As you know, I'm a retired police officer, and in the police service, there's all those promotions, right? Sergeant, detective, staff sergeant, inspector, superintendent, deputy chief, chief. So those are all great titles to achieve, and the gist of the article was, uh, asking the guys, especially the younger guys, can you name me the deputy chief from 10 years ago? Can you
Right.
name me the superintendents? Uh, no, most of them have no idea who these people were. And but on your deathbed, those titles mean nothing to you. It's your dad, grandpa, papa in my case.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Those are the titles that are important.
Yeah. And what you talk about, like, on your deathbed, those things don't really matter. This is one of the things that, like when Jacob and I do our life compass, this is one of the things that we're encouraging men to really think about, which is, and I'm not the first to do this, many have done it, Stephen Covey did it, but to invite men to really think intentionally about their funeral. And two questions really to ponder, to think about. Number one, who are the people that you really want to have there? Like, who, if they didn't attend your funeral, like, you would just be devastated. And then the second thing is, of those people that are attending your funeral, what do you want them who matter most to you to say about your life as they celebrate it? And to get very clear on those two things, because what it does is it helps you prioritize the most important relationships, which are the ones that you absolutely want at your funeral, and the presence that you want to bring into those relationships, because that's what they're going to be speaking about at your funeral. And so living with that in your mind all the time helps you prioritize, because how many times, Sean, I'm sure you're guilty of this, I certainly am, do we take a lot of those things that are the people that are most important and the presence we want to bring in those relationships for granted, and we just kind of drift, or we just don't intentionally think about it. It baffles my mind. Like, I work with executives all the time. I can't believe how much time and energy and collaboration and cascading messaging that has to go out for a strategic plan. Well, the most important thing that you're planning is your life. There's nothing more important than your life. And we sometimes just kind of approach it accidentally. We don't really get clear on the things that matter most, the people that matter most, the presence that we want to bring into those relationships. So, yeah, we absolutely have to do that. And that's primarily the work of leading yourself, which is the fundamental work. No really strong leader, a person of profound influence with others, has ever done that in the absence of leading themselves first. We have to lead ourselves first, and getting clear on those kind of really big, important questions, relationships, all that, I just think is critical.
Like my dad used to say that you have to look in the mirror every morning when you shave, and like the guy that's looking back. So it's so that's what you want other people to do as well. Just want to give a shout out here to Ron, joined us from Hawaii,
Hey,
and I
Ron.
think it's Charles from Houston. Gentlemen, if there's some questions that you would like to ask, I'm going to do my best to read the small print that's across the room and see if we can answer them. But you're hitting something so important, and that's where you take that out to the world, and that's where you can lead in the secular world with what you're talking about, those principles, because that's what makes a good leader outside as well, right? That's so important.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are not, they're universal, and they're not specific to Christianity. Um, I mean, one of the best bodies of work that has ever been accumulated over time is the work of James Kouzos and Barry Posner. Both of them, actually, James Kouzos is pretty strong, devout Christian. Barry Posner, I don't think is. Pardon me, Barry, if I'm saying that incorrectly. But they did this. They wrote this book 30 years ago called The Leadership Challenge. And John Maxwell, who we've already quoted, is kind of the guru of modern day leadership, says that The Leadership Challenge is the very best book on leadership ever written. And I agree with that because it's the kind of book that is not based on any fads or emerging trends. It is bare bones, always standing to be true principles of leadership. And it's based on 30 years of study. And over these 30 years, they've extended it from into multiple industries like academics, politics, corporate world, nonprofits, community-based, all that, like right across the board, every industry and across geography, all across the globe. The principles that they're presenting in this book hold true of leadership. And it's things like modeling the way, providing an example. It's things like encouraging the heart, inspiring a shared vision with people, enabling other people to act. These are principles that you can very quickly find in the life of Jesus Christ, and yet they're not writing an explicit Christian book. Truth is truth, and
Yep.
we have to abide by that truth, especially as leaders. So yeah, there's universal things about leadership that can be applied in every situation. And frankly, this is where I think the church um, has not done as well as we can, which is to take some of the universal truths that are often promulgated in the corporate world better than the church world, but for us to apply them into the church world because of the importance of our mission. I have no problem with taking a principle that Jim Collins has, created in one of his books and applying it to our mission if it helps us accomplish our mission better. I think actually as church leaders, we have a moral obligation to do that. If something is
Yeah.
going to help us, perform and advance our mission better with more impact, then yeah, I think that we have to. So it's kind of the both end. There's universal truths that you can find right in the life of Jesus Christ himself. And there's things even in the corporate world that we need to apply and not be afraid of that. And in fact, to do it. So maybe I'm rambling a bit there, but
No, I think you're hitting the nail right on the head there. And what's interesting is our diocese is going through a diocesan renewal and a parish renewal.
mm,
And it's, I'm, so we're examining all those things. And the whole reason Catholic Men's Leadership Alliance was set up was just to create those best practices and God Squad is embracing them. We've taken the heroic men as the forward facing brand because it really resonates of what we're hoping men to take away is that heroic virtue. And I know my experience in the secular world is the importance of them trusting you. Like I was in command of 20 guys on the riot squad for G8 and the Red Mile and
wow.
World Petroleum Congress. And like I like telling the story of the day I saved McDonald's as back in the early 2000s, every one of those international meetings was turning into riots with the police and Calgary. We were able to curb that trend through a lot of great leadership and throughout our organization, but also like when they were going to do some direct action against the McDonald's, I went out with my squad and surrounded the McDonald's. and they were pushing, and a couple of my guys wanted to arrest people, and I'm going, no, let's get this settled first, take control,
Wow.
and because of that, because they want that spark, then it's our fault, the police did
Yeah.
this, and then that caused the riot, right? And to have that trust of your men to just be trusting you to make the decisions, uh, and that's where bring that home into the family, having
Yeah.
your family trust you that you're going to make the right decisions. You have to earn that. It doesn't just show up one day, right?
Oh man. I mean, you're touching on something. What a beautiful example, Sean. I want to learn more about this experience with the riots because that's a real acute situation, requiring trust for sure. And it would have been so easy to try and shortcut that with force, which is what you didn't do, right?
Yeah.
With longer term benefit, but in the moment, man, we got to get control of this, take it right away, take it by force. That would have been the temptation, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's in a lot of policing, like, is that restraint.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And we're making very big decisions in extremely short times, and that's where training. So how can we as Catholic men train
Mm,
ourselves to be leaders so that when we are in situations we know what to do?
yeah. No, that's a great question. And I guess I would say I would go back to training really means deepening our trustworthiness in the eyes of other people, um, which means character development, which means developing the virtues, prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude, faith, hope, and love, the theological virtues. That is fundamental because, I mean, it's funny because it used to be and even in the church, this is another lesson I think the church has learned the hard way. It used to be that titles and positions and miters and croziers and all those things guaranteed kind of a certain obedience or followership, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, that no longer exists. Those days are long gone. We live in what I would say is the trust economy. Either you're building trust and have wealth as a leader, or you're not building trust, in which case you have nothing on which you're standing. There is no foundation. And so developing trust, I think, is the number one responsibility of a leader. And so how do you develop trust? Well, you make and keep commitments. You do what you say you're going to do. And if you don't, you acknowledge that and you apologize. One of the things that leaders, I think, have to do a better job at, because we all make mistakes, we all do things that are just kind of mistakes because of poor judgment, or we actually do something that we go temporarily against even our own conscience. And then we realize, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. And one of the best things you can do as a leader when you make those mistakes is actually apologize. Which it's funny because I was doing a workshop for some bishops recently, and we dwelt on this ability and what an apology actually is, and what the components of an effective apology are. And it was amazing because it, it seems so simple, and yet when you think about it, as leaders, when you really do something wrong, make a mistake, you end up hurting somebody, or you make a bad decision that leads to negative consequences. If you don't acknowledge that, then not only have you made the mistake, but now you're communicating to your people that you're clueless. When leaders apologize for the mistakes they made, the pain that they cause, they're only acknowledging the truth that everybody sees. And so they recognize you as a person of humility, because humility is living in the truth. And so the ability to do that is another way to, strengthen and deepen trust. But building trust, like training for leadership, building trust is the most important thing that we can do. And it's very simple. You make and keep commitments. You say what you do what you're gonna say, and all those things for sure.
Yeah. And so many leaders have a problem doing that. a lot of virtue reveals. That's from Corey. So thanks, Corey. See
Yeah.
if I can take that off. Strengthen him and see. I'm learning new things today.
Well done, Sean. I'm impressed.
Hey, who
Yeah,
said you
well
can't
done.
teach an old dog new tricks? Eh?
You're learning in real time.
In real time. There you go. Well, I was trying to expand it to read it better, and it did it for
You put
me.
it on the screen. Kudos to Corey who put it
Yeah,
in.
yeah, and that's and you're hitting on something that's so important, and so many leaders think that's a sign of weakness
Yeah.
to admit that you were wrong, when it's actually a sign of strength that you are comfortable enough in yourself to admit your mistakes,
Yeah.
learn from them, and move on, because that's how you get best practices, right? Is you
Absolutely.
learn from your mistakes. As
And then
Brett,
you're modeling to others that first of all, it's okay to make mistakes around here. Because if you create a culture by your behavior that you don't acknowledge your own mistakes, then what you're symbolically communicating to people is that mistakes they're not allowed around here. And so then you're limiting people from taking the risks that they need to in order to do their job well. And if they make a mistake, then they might have a temptation even to hide it. So the negative consequences when leaders don't acknowledge the mistakes that they've made are very, very significant, to say the least.
well, and Lorand, who's watching, he talks about, he brings 30 years of experience of being bit in the ass by many different things,
Right.
and these are what leads to wisdom. And that's why I think it's important that, like you talked about a grandpa, it's so important that these men that have learned a lot of stuff the hard way,
Yeah.
that they share this wisdom with
Oh
the
yeah.
next generation.
Oh, our world is in desperate need of sages, Sean. I couldn't agree more. But here's the thing with sages, and the reason why I think we in the church or even in the corporate world or whatever are not benefiting from the wisdom of the sages is because a sage, by their very nature, their age and all the rest, they've already been there and done that. They've accomplished what they need to accomplish. They don't have this ambition of, making their mark and all that. So the sage typically waits to be asked. That's the posture of a sage. They wait to be asked. They might have some wisdom for a parent, an executive, a police constable, a sergeant, a president of a university, but they're going to wait to be asked. And so we need to have the humility to actually ask and to submit under, mentors and sages in our life. And unfortunately, we've got a kind of I think C.S. Lewis called it chronological arrogance. It's like whatever is now is better than what was before. And that's like heightened with social media and everything. And so we're not by nature seeking out the wisdom of sages because they don't even know how to write or do a TikTok video, or they don't know how to, post something on social media. It's like, that's so silly. I mean, there's so much that they have to offer. So,
Well, and I think I read it in Conversation with God years and years ago.
hmm.
If you read only modern works, you will make ancient errors.
Oh,
And
that's good. That's good.
yeah, and it's one thing that I've tried to incorporate in my toolbox as a leader, is just reflecting on, okay, has this been done before? And
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll never forget. I've had different sages in my life at different times. And some of the nuggets that like one of them was one of my mentors. He's probably 35 years older than me because he's getting quite old now. Um, he said to me, every night when your kids are small, you pray this prayer over them, which is, Lord, help bridge the gap between the love that they deserve and the love they receive in this world so as to mend their heart. Talk
whoa,
about wisdom for a father, right? He said, you need to live your life in such a way that you paint an accurate image of God the Father by the brush of your example. I will never forget that wisdom that he gave me. He said to me, all of your life is filled with relationships and you're doing your best to keep up with them, and you have too many relationships to do that well. But you have to remember, Brett, that some of those relationships are built with glass and you never drop them. It's like, and the rest are with rubber and they'll bounce back. It's like, but I had to ask, right? Like that wisdom was available to me, but it's like, please help me. I need help. But yeah, the wisdom of sages. I have benefited from sages in my life, all my adult life.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Brett.
Mm.
So we're coming up on the half hour here. Is there any closing remarks that you'd like to leave how to be a heroic leader? How to be a heroic
Wow.
man?
Mm. Well, I came across this quote. I forget where I got it, but I wanted to give citation, but I can't. But anyways, it gives a lot of purpose for me. But the very best leaders are these kinds of folks. They are ordinary people accomplishing extraordinary things, and extraordinary people living very ordinary lives. And I think the most important area for most of the listeners for their leadership journey is in the four walls of their own home. There's nothing more important than the family that you lead. And you're irreplaceable in that. And that has to have the right care, attention, energy, bandwidth, focus that's appropriate for that. So I would just encourage men, when you're thinking about your own leadership journey, do not think first and foremost of your career or the workplace or even your community. Think about your home and your family, because there is nothing more important that you're leading than your wife and your kids if God has blessed you with them.
Well, thank you, Brett. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And I look forward to working with you and having further discussions and learning the wisdom that has been imparted to you so that we do this work together. And that's what we're trying to create, is this network of men working together to fix the world. But it
Yeah.
starts in the family, and that's so important. That when I did Youth at Risk, that's what I talked about. If I can help this one kid,
Mm,
that affects his family, which affects a larger group. Like, yeah,
absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
exponentially important, the work that we're doing. So thank you again, and we will be looking for your wisdom in many opportunities coming up here with the heroic men. So
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for your opportunity and for all your service. I said it before, I say it again. You're one of the best servant leaders I've ever met. So well done. Kudos.
thank you.